Are you rocking 200,000 miles on that belt on that car you bought that you don't really know when the belt was last changed? Well, are you holding off because you don't know how to do it and you're scared? Well, you should do it because you're going to be real scared if that belt breaks. Trust me.
Surgeon general warning, I am not responsible for any damage that you do to your own car.
All right, so there's a couple things I want to talk about before we get started on the Tommy job.
For this job, you're going to be needing a 10, 13, 17, 19, and 21 millimeter sockets, a 6 millimeter Allen, a few deep well 10s helps, 13 and 10 millimeter wrenches, some pliers, and the specialty tools for holding all the timing in place and loosening the cam nut. The tensioner tool part number is MN3333, and it also helps to have all three size ratchets and extensions for each.
I do have the car already disassembled a little bit,
But it shouldn't make much of a difference for this video. Big differences you're gonna see here between this and a stock engine bay is over here there's this cold air intake crap. Oh, look. Nope, Edelbrock. Huh. Almost thought that was gonna be a fucking AutoZone. Probably is. Anyway, I've already got that removed. That stuff is all held on here with these funny Volkswagen clamps. Gotta love those. Except for when they're in hard to get places, which they always are. I already have the timing cover off, which is just held on by some clips. The PCV tube is gone. That's held on by this. Also, the big glaring thing that maybe somebody noticed, the transmission's gone. I had to take the transmission out to change. This guy messed up my day pretty good, I'll tell you what. You'd think that wouldn't be too bad, but no, it's pretty bad. So anyway, I had to take the whole transmission back out. One thing I noticed while I was doing that, the seal on this does not look very good. It's not leaking, but it's like bulging and splitting. So I swapped this transmission in out of an MK4 because I got bored of sticking my foot out the door to push this thing backwards. I forgot to mention earlier that any plastic covers on this car that would be normally here in the wheel well and the skid pan underneath are gone. I didn't get them with the car. I'm kind of glad I didn't. I hate those damn things. That should be all the major things that are already disassembled here. Everything as far as the belts and everything down here, that stuff's already all put together. And this engine is covered in oil, partly because of this PCV tube. The person I bought the car from said that it had blow by, and I was skeptical because I'm skeptical of everything anybody tells me. I don't know if it was the valve itself or, you know what, this is some garbage, you know. Ooh, right in the garbage pile. I suspect this is either too restrictive or this PCV valve is shot, probably both. So I'm gonna have to come up with something else for that. I'm sure if you were just looking for the install or the uninstall or whatever, you've already left by now. But let's get started. All right, you want to start by removing the passenger side wheel. You're going to need to remove that to get to the belts. Look at that beauty. Now, if you look at this, this is a great example of having things that you might not necessarily need for the job. Now, if you look here, someone has been in here before, and I would hope so at 500,000 miles, you know what I mean? Check out this bolt here. Now, that's gonna be easy to get out because these actually, when these strip out, it's super easy to get that shit out. I've had to do it so many times. But I'm gonna have to replace that bolt. And where am I gonna find it? Who knows? Not me. I was actually able to get that Allen bolt out with just the normal 6 millimeter Allen socket. If one of these bolts is stripped out on your car, the best thing to do is to go buy a pack of easy outs and grind down the tip of the biggest one in the set and hammer it in there and take it out. I've never had that not work for one of these little Allen head bolts. They're stripped out all the time. So don't be surprised if somebody sold you the car because they tried to do the timing belt and got in there and one of these Allen heads were rounded off. So they just put it back together and said, all right, it's time to sell it. It happens a lot. All right here, we're gonna be using a 13mm wrench to release the tension on the serpentine belt. Pop that off of there, and then you should be able to remove the crankshaft pulley down at the bottom. It's on there a little tight, so you'll probably have to jiggle it. I'm gonna be removing these two 10mm bolts off the plastic timing cover and removing the plastic timing cover underneath so we can get to the belt. All right, gonna go ahead, take the valve cover off. That's gonna be 3 10mm on it right on the top. All right, and it's lost inside the engine forever. All right, once you take those off, there's gonna be these rubber grommets and metal caps here. Mine's got a bunch of washers and shit because the valve cover was leaking at one point, I suspect. I ordered everything to replace all this shit. So I'm not particularly worried about it besides these metal washers. I didn't order those. The rest of it is there. Here comes the valve cover. A couple more grommets. Valve cover's ready. Come on. There we go. Let's see. I have not looked at this valve train yet. All right. Now the valve cover's off, let me tickle your fancy about top dead center here. So over here on the top of the flywheel, there will be, hopefully, there'll be a mark on there, right there. And there's gonna be this opening in the belt housing. This is actually very convenient that this is not in the car. Right here, this black plastic cover, pop that off, and inside of there, you should see that mark line up. Once the engine's at top dead center and you install the fuel pump pin, you can break loose the camshaft nut and install the camshaft locking tool. Make sure you do not torque the fuel pump pin. Now you can install the camshaft holding tool. You don't want to use this for torquing at all. So anytime you're torquing any part of the belt, you want to use the holder here. You can see me pushing back towards the cabin with the cam sprocket tool to allow the locking tool to fit properly in its recess in the camshaft. Once you're at top dead center, you want to make sure that both of these cam lobes are making a V shape. You've got your cam lock tool locked nicely into place. And then once both of those are set, you want to come down to the fuel pump pin and check and make sure the fuel pump pin is in. Loosen the 13mm nut on the timing belt tensioner. Got it. All right, now remove the roller. This is going to be a 13mm nut as well. Listen, man, I don't question your ethics, so don't question mine. It's probably not smart.
Good fucking shit.
I knew it wasn't smart. That was the universe reiterating the point.
There you go. That's the news. It's on the bottom. It's tactically off.
Okay. Now
You
down
lost
at the
our
bottom.
light. We need
Okay.
our light
Now
back.
before we do anything else, I need to go down to the bottom. And I need to put the crank lock on. the crankshaft. So if you're in my position where the transmission is out or your timing mark is really faded, which I have both those problems, finding top dead center on the crank can be really difficult, but it's really important you get it right. So what I did in my situation was down on the 19 millimeter bolt down there, top dead center is at the end of an exhaust stroke. So you can feel in the crankshaft bolt after you have the belt off, you can feel the piston go up, and right when it hits the top, it'll drop a little bit just from its own weight. And what I did was I moved it up to the top, very, very tip top, right to where it was about to pull over. And then I locked my cam tool in to make sure that it was in time. If you don't do that and you take the belt off before putting the cam lock on, you're gonna end up a half a tooth out or more. And trust me, you don't want to make that mistake. Down here, the crank lock tool has a little nub on it that fits into a recess up there that you can't really see, and it holds the crank into place. You don't want to tighten these down super tight. I just did them finger tight with an Allen socket. I cannot stress this enough. Double check that your crankshaft is at TDC before you tighten in the crank lock. Do it. Double check, triple check, double check. Looks pretty good though. I put 100,000 on it. I don't know how many thousands the guy before me put on it, but some thousands, that's for sure. New one. This comes all the way off because I'm replacing this. A good tip for any vehicle you're working on, anytime you take a nut or a bolt out from somewhere that you can put it back, do it. It helps.
Make sure it finds its home.
So part of the reason that I made this video was that I couldn't really find any videos on this particular engine, doing the timing belt and actually installing it as well. So I found another video online of a similar setup but with the mechanical pump. I'm going to put a link to his video in the description since he has the engine out of the car. It's a lot easier to see, and he explains very well in depth how to get the belt on. But what you want to do is you want to get it right on the edges and make sure you have no slack between the pump and the cam and no slack between the pump and the crank. And my little trick was to spray a tiny little bit of WD-40 on the tensioner, and that allowed me to slip the belt like so over the edge of the tensioner and get it on there. Once you do that, you can tighten up the camshaft bolt, but don't torque it down yet. Once you've done that, you want to make sure that this pin has found its way into its home. Alright, to tension to the belt, what you're going to want to do is use the specialty tool that grabs onto the two little holes in the tensioner. And you want to rotate the tensioner clockwise until the two tabs on the tensioner line up. And the tensioner is in the full extended position. And then you want to tighten down the 13 millimeter nut. Alright, once you got the two notches lined up and the 13 millimeter snug down, you should be good to put the roller back on. I would do this before you tighten down the camshaft nut. Alright, all that's left to do besides turn the engine over a few rotations is to tighten up and torque down that cam nut. Make sure it's real tight because the tightness of this bolt is what holds the sprocket taut against the camshaft. After the camshaft bolt is torqued down, you want to go down to the 19 millimeter nut on the crankshaft and rotate it clockwise. At least 2 to 4 rotations. Make sure that the engine is still in time and the valves are not going to hit your pistons when you go to start the engine. Now there's an extra little hole on the crankshaft pulley, the main one, and the secondary one. And it lines up with a little nub that is on the block itself under there, and you'll be able to see the nub through the hole if it's lined up properly. Reinstall the 4 bolts that hold the pulleys on. Alright, and now it's time to re-tension the power steering and water pump belt. You're going to need to start by loosening this 13 millimeter nut over here. This thing drove me crazy the first time I tried to tension this belt. I could not figure it out. So what you need to do is you loosen that one bolt over there and then grab this bolt with a pair of pliers. And by turning the big bolt underneath the smaller bolt here, it allows the entire power steering pump to move forward and back, which allows you to get the belt on. One thing I want to add is that my tensioner bolt is really destroyed, so I just use a pair of pliers on this one because it barely works as it's supposed to. I believe the nut is a 22 millimeter, but it could be a 21 because I never had access to a non-buggered one. So once the belt is tightened as tight as you want it, usually you have to hold this bolt to keep it taut. You tighten the 13 millimeter nut back down and the belt is tensioned. Alrighty, it's time to install the new valve cover gasket. After you put your 3 little rubber washers, new ones, on each one of these studs. Replace the studs if you have to. Mine were stripped out, so I replaced them. Make sure this sits in its little nook. This too. My experience, these are super easy to strip, so be careful with them. And no, I did not use an air ratchet to tighten these down. So there's a rubber grommet on the stud underneath the valve cover. Then there's a rubber grommet on the top of the valve cover, covered by a metal cap. And then the bolt bolts down on top of the washer onto the metal cap. And then there's a plastic cap that goes on top of the bolt. Ta-da! And all of the hard work is done. Everything's back in, transmission's back in. And I even got the timing cover on. Aren't you lucky? Alright, so once you've got the timing belt all on and in time and ready to go, you're going to need to check your fuel pump timing. So in order to do that, you're going to need to loosen the mounting bolts. There's going to be 3 inside of the sprocket inside of here, and then there's also one in the back here, which mine is missing. It doesn't have it all. The 4th bolt you need to undo is right down there on the bottom of that bracket. Unoccupied hole on my engine. So the way this works, very simple. After all those bolts are loosened a little bit, don't take them out, just loosen them. You'll be able to grab this pump with your hand and rotate it back, which would be more advanced, or forward towards you would be more retarded. You are gonna want to set it initially a little advanced. If your car doesn't run after you put the belt back on, I'd be willing to bet you're about a half a tooth off. Or if you need to advance it as hard as you can towards the block, you're off a tooth. So you need to take everything apart and redo the belt again. All right, let's see how the old Porsche fires up. Looks like we've got power. That's good. That's exciting. Ooh, would you look at this? Ah, runs good. Okay, so now that it's running, we're gonna go into VCDS, control modules, O1 engine, measuring blocks once it connects. go up 1, group, and then back down to 0, which will reload the page into your timing there. Switch to basic settings. TDI timing. This is a 1.9 1Z AHU. I don't know if you just noticed, but in my timing values when I was pulling that up, block 2 is saying 255, partially because my car was really cold. Once the car warmed up a little bit, we're into an acceptable range here. This is a little bit advanced. If you want to go for stock, you're gonna have to pull the fuel pump towards you, away from the car, and try to get closer to this line. This would be too retarded. You're gonna want to advance it by pushing it towards the cabin. I like to sit around the green line a little bit. But if you open this up and the timing says 255, you got one of two problems. Your car's either too cold or you're off on your timing belt by a half a tooth, and you need to take everything apart and redo it again. My car, I just happened to nail the baseline timing, luckily for me, so I'm gonna shut down the old Porsche and stop suffocating myself in my garage. All right, well, that's it. That should be just about everything. And if you're still here watching, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Maybe leave me a like and subscribe. If you don't want to, that's cool too, you know. But I've got a ton of other projects I'm going to be doing on this car. I need to be cutting the floors out, taking care of the rust down there. It's not too bad, but I got to patch what's there. Yeah, the transmission, I just got the transmission all back in, you know, as you saw. And the brand new transmission I swapped in seems to be leaking gear oil from the input shaft. So I'm going to be ripping the transmission out again. I think it might be the 4th time in a row. I'm super excited. I might make a video about it. I don't know. Kind of a pain in the ass. But I might do it because I might be feeling it, you know. So, you know, maybe stick around for that. Maybe don't. What does it matter? We're all going to die. Yeah. Oh, just coming out here. Start up the old whip today. Anyway, let's give her a rip. Oh, yeah. Listen to that baby purr. Oh. One more time for all 2 of you, though. Thanks for watching.